If you wait for all your ducks to be in a row to go after an opportunity, you'll miss the opportunity. Sometimes you just got to go all in. There you go, James, there's your team. And I just looked and it was a floor that just went for miles with all these people. A well-run board should be challenging the exec team. It should be thinking about initiatives outside the box. There is so much information out there now. It's how do you disseminate the useful information from the useless information. There's likely to be more involvement from an AI perspective. How does that adoption of AI and governance of AI work at a boardroom level?
So for people that might be watching or listening to this who don't know you, would you be able to give a little bit of background? Who is James and how did you end up in public markets?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So my background, I'm ex-military. So I was in the Royal Navy for 7 years as a warfare officer, gunnery officer initially, then navigation officer. And I left the Navy back end of 2008, and I was doing an MBA at the time. So I was very much interested in the commercial world, and I went into the defence, marine, energy sector from 2008 up until now. So I've worked in various size organisations from SMEs, private companies, right through to FTSE 100 and Fortune 50 companies, mainly commercial business development sort of roles at senior level. And now my sort of remit roles are, I'm Vice Chair of Defence Holdings PLC, which is listed on the main market. I'm currently CEO of Voyant, which is a spin out from the University of Liverpool, again very much focused on the defence sector. I am a trustee director of the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade, and I'm also a non-executive director of McKnight Resources, which is a Swedish-based mineral exploration company.
I didn't know about that last one. Is that listed or unlisted at the moment?
No, it's unlisted at the moment, but we're looking at listing. Very much focused in Sweden around rare minerals and metals.
Right.
So I'm sort of supporting them from a corporate governance perspective as they sort of evolve on their journey, as it were. But they've got some very interesting projects.
So you're very busy.
Very busy. Yeah.
Was that always, so coming out of the Navy, was it always your quote unquote plan to go into the private sector, to go into the broad world of business? Was that something you'd always thought about, or?
Yeah, I think, I went to university before I joined the Navy, did maritime business, marine law. So I was always interested in maritime defence, but very much interested in the commercial world as well as defence. I suppose I did go into the military thinking it would be longer term, probably a full-term commission around 22 years, but decided after 7 years that it was the time to sort of get out. Like I said, I was doing an MBA at the time as well, which was quite interesting. So that sort of reignited my passion for the commercial world. End of 2008 was a time, I would say a time that I would look or would be good to go into the commercial world. But in the military at the time, you had to give a year's notice.
Right.
Which is quite a significant
That's
amount
a
of time.
long notice period, yeah.
So October 2007, I said, right, I'm going to make the leap. I'm going to go,
right around the GFC?
Exactly, yeah. And so I got...
You thought, seems like the commercial world's doing so well at the moment, I must join.
So I got 7 months into my notice period, and suddenly the financial crash happened. And I was like, oh my God, where am I going to go with this? But I found a fantastic defence maritime consultancy company based in the UK. Joined them. I was with them for about just under 3 years. Got my sort of foundation in the commercial world. Picked up a lot of contract experience, etc. Working with clients, and it sort of went from there really.
Well, let's fast forward to Defence Holdings. Your connection to public markets at the moment. You've been there for how long now?
So I joined him, I think it was April, May last year.
Okay.
So yeah,
just over a year.
Yeah.
And so when you are a public leader, you get a lot of advice. Some of it is very good, some of it is not so good, from lots of different sources. Thinking back over the last year and a bit, what has been the best piece of advice apropos public leadership that you've received or come across?
Yeah, I think probably the best advice has probably come from my partner, Eleanor, and that's been only worry about those things that you can influence and control.
That's a good one.
So I think, as a public sector leader, there's a lot to consider, and certainly if it's not your only job and you've got other board roles and non-exec or exec roles, but there's a lot going on, and so you need to prioritise very much what's important to you, what's the priority, what's going to make the most impact. So I've always, I've taken that on board. I try and put that into practice, although she may have a completely different response to that and say, James, you do still concentrate on the stuff that maybe you can't.
And maybe
control.
Part of that as well is very different being an executive in a business versus a non-executive.
Yeah.
And you do sort of need to be a little bit more zoomed out. And is it sort of relating to that as well, that there are just things that you can't or perhaps shouldn't be involved in.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think it's difficult, when you've got a non-exec role or you're in a non-exec role and you're also in an exec role, it's difficult to sometimes distinguish between the two, and I do, I'll put my hand up as a non-exec within Defence Holdings that sometimes I do at board meetings try and get into the nitty-gritty of something because I want to help and support the exec team with hopefully my experience and background. And so you have to keep checking with yourself and saying, step back from this, James. That's not your, that's not your remit. You're looking at a holistic or strategic view. Focus on that and let the exec team take control of the detail, shall we say.
No, that makes sense. And then flipping it around, what's the worst piece of advice that you've come across or received related?
So maybe not in the last year, but one piece of advice probably is around don't wait to be ready for something. And I suppose I go back to my time when I was at Babcock, FTSE 100 defence engineering company at the time. I was business development director up at Rosyth. And I think if I'd taken that advice at that time, I wouldn't have been in that position. Because I remember walking into the sort of office up in Rosyth on day one as the new business development director, and the managing director said, "There you go, James. There's your team." And I just looked, and it was a floor that just went for miles with all these people, and I was 36, 37 at the time, and I think if you wait for if you wait for all your ducks to be in a row to go after an opportunity, you'll miss the opportunity. I'm not saying fake it to make it, but actually sometimes you just got to go all in and just go for some of these opportunities sometimes. And I had a fantastic 2.5 years at Babcock, we were building 2 aircraft carriers for the Royal Navy at the time. Just to give you a scale of the size of the organisation, we had 4,500 people on site. We were a £400 million business, 320-acre manufacturing facility, so the largest manufacturing facility in the UK. So it's a fantastic facility, fantastic people, and what helped me in that role was actually putting in place a really good team to support you, really. We went on to win some pretty significant contracts. My last couple of months there, we won Type 31, which was the new frigate programme for the Royal Navy, which is about £1.25 billion.
So going from Royal Navy, private sector, PLC, what skills, has there been skills or an approach or a perspective that you picked up from when you're in the Navy that have been transferable to PLC life?
Yeah, I think there's several, but I think the key ones are probably the that stick out is the leadership piece. I think there's no better organisation in the world to learn leadership skills and then gain that experience than probably the military. You go through a whole year, certainly as a naval officer, you go through a whole year at Dartmouth learning, down on the south coast, learning the basics of being an officer in the Royal Navy and the leadership skills to then go into the fleet, and then obviously putting that experience and background into place. So I would say, certainly from the leadership perspective, that's been very transferable.
Did you find when you got into the boardroom at Defence Holdings that it was more, less, or similarly well structured to the Navy?
I think it was, I would say, similarly structured, and I think, and I would say that because we are heavily involved in the defence sector and national security sector, so very much focused on that. But I think as a board, we've got a fantastic blend of capabilities. I've got the defence background and experience, but it's not just me that's got that experience. So we've got Staz, who's a non-executive director, co-founder of Through Dark, ex-Navy, Royal Marine like myself. And then obviously we've got Lord Horton, Field Marshal, British Army. So we bring at various levels, we bring sort of that military sort of not discipline but structure.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Is there in the boardroom at Defence Holdings, you've got people there that have served, those I guess you call them civilians that haven't. Is their approach to business and leadership, are there noticeable differences?
Yeah, I think everyone brings their own skill set. So from an insight perspective on how the military operates, how it applies technology, equipment to the front line, how it operates from a process perspective, certainly comes from the likes of myself, Staz and Lord Horton. But then you've got a blend of technology and corporate finance skills and expertise that come from Brian Stockbridge, certainly from a finance perspective, and corporate governance. Derek Liu, for example, knowledge that those guys have got in public listed companies is absolutely fantastic. And then you've got the technology guys like Ian Yarwood Lovett. And also obviously our CTO and Andy McCartney. And then bringing that all together is obviously Andrew Ruffin, who's just joined us as CEO. So it's a fantastic blend. I think we've got the mix right, I think, which is great. So sometimes I see boards where there's very much group thinking, and you don't necessarily get the right challenges or sort of initiatives that you would hope that a well-run, effective board would have in place.
And my guess, as a civilian myself, so not really knowing what I'm talking about, that one of the things I imagine leaders who have come from a service background would bring is this really well-developed ability to bring a team together around an objective and a goal.
Yeah.
And because it sounds quote unquote simple, but it's not. But, my sense is when you're coming from that background, very good at bringing people together, we have a goal, we need to unite around that and make it happen. And that decisiveness and ability to bring people together, I imagine, and it'd be good to hear your view on this, I imagine, say, someone like Lord Horton would be fantastic at. And that would be a huge part of what he's doing in the boardroom for the group.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, the strategic clarity that he brings.
That's a better way of saying it.
Yeah. The strategic clarity that he brings to the board is fantastic, and the insight, the experience, the background. If there's if there's a challenge that we're looking at and we're trying to resolve. I mean, you've got a fantastic blend of, like I said, corporate governance, technology, military background, and you know, it's everyone having an input into that. But then from a chair level, it's then deciding from all that information, collating all that information quite quickly in some cases.
Yeah, final
right,
through line.
This is the way we're going to go, and certainly, you know, he's been on board since. I say on board as a naval term, but he's been on board since October. I think it was October, maybe slightly before that. But I've learnt a significant amount from him. You know, my background in the military was just 7 years. You know, I left as a senior lieutenant and obviously field marshal with over 40 years experience. It's an incredible achievement. And I would also add, we're also blessed by Richard Bassett as well, who's our VP of Business Development within Defence Holdings. Fantastic amount of experience. So although we talk about Lord Horton with obviously being, you know, Field Marshal, Richard was Command Sergeant Major within UK. So you can't say too much, but which is a very, very senior non-commissioned officer. So you get very much the strategic direction as well as the tactical direction from Richard as well. So it's a fantastic blend. Yeah, it works really well.
And the setup you have, which I haven't seen this in many companies in the UK, is you've got Lord Horton as chair and yourself as vice chair.
Yeah.
How does that relationship work in the boardroom? And how do you, I suppose, split role and responsibility across chair and vice chair? Because I haven't seen a lot of chair-vice chair combinations.
Yeah, and nor have I. Yeah. And I think it depends on what you make of the role. I think so. I think in some organisations it's more of a ceremonial role, I would say. But I wouldn't say it's that in Defence Holdings. So, you know, operating within the defence sector is quite complex stakeholder engagements and opportunities that we're obviously targeting as an organisation. And so, I think I think it works very well. You know, I'm there as a sort of support to Lord Horton in terms of you know, leadership and governance of the board, running with initiatives. I think it works pretty much like a CEO, COO role at an executive level, but at the board level.
And so I suppose what you're saying is, given the complexity of things that you need to deal with at a board level, it makes sense to have more leadership around that chair role than just having, say, a chair and not having a vice chair. Yeah,
and I think, you know, I think what I sort of help bring at that more strategic level is not just the military background experience, but also the commercial background experience as well. So, you know, having operated in, and I'm just trying to think, probably one of the only ones that have operated in a tier 1 defence company, you sort of understand sort of the processes and procedures, and also the government procurement processes and procedures, and you can bring that into that strategic fold, as it were. So, vice chair works very well, certainly for us as Defence Holdings. But I go back to, you know, the role is what you make of it, and I think you know, we've got a set of job descriptions, and the relationship between myself, Lord Horton and Andrew Ruffin works really well.
So before we move on, two things. So takeaway for other directors that are listening to this. What is something that you think a director who doesn't have a military background, what is a skill that people who've served bring to the boardroom that perhaps a civilian director could embrace? Or what's something that we can learn from, say, yourself, Lord Horton, and others who are in the boardroom but have that background? What's a unique leadership skill that comes from that?
I think that's a good question. I'd say probably every day is a school day.
Yeah.
have that open mind.
The curiosity.
Yeah, the curiosity piece. You know, don't be afraid to challenge. If you don't quite understand or you've got another view on something that's being discussed.
And do you think that's, sorry to interrupt you, do you think that's specifically, or that's particularly prevalent in the military where you're constantly receiving new information and having to adjust? So something that perhaps you're more likely to have developed from that background versus a purely commercial background?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you certainly in the military world, you're put into some very interesting situations and scenarios that you need to adapt and move quite quickly to sort of resolve and move forward on. So you are more curious as to the information you're receiving, and I think that translates into the boardroom definitely. So I mean, I would say go into it with an open mind, and a well-run board should be challenging the exec team. It should be thinking about initiatives outside the box, for example, and running through whether they work or whether they don't work, and providing that additional expertise.
I think that the pushback is an interesting one as well, that it is okay to, because I interpret pushback as don't just accept everything as presented, but also feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to say, I actually don't get this. Let's not just take this as read. Like this thing in the board pack that you've said, I'm actually happy to put my hand up and say, I don't know what this is. Can we go through it? And that's actually okay. And that sort of curiosity and vulnerability is helpful.
Yeah, and I think, if you've got a really good chair that has put in place a secure place, a safe place that allows you to be that open, then a safe environment in which to operate, in which you can put your hand up and say, actually, I want to know a little bit more about this, or I disagree with this. Can you try and explain to me a little bit more so that I can get a better understanding to make a decision? Then I think boardroom is not a scary place to be. I would say.
Well, I think that's good, and I don't think that's the case in every boardroom. That they're safe and safe environments for vulnerability and asking questions. So that makes sense. All right, so zooming out a little bit, there has been a lot of new investment into just defence as a sector in the last couple of years. That is a macro tailwind for companies like Defence Holdings because there's just more interest. And there's probably more willingness from investors to get involved where perhaps there hadn't been in years gone by. How does a small company, how does that manifest for a company like Defence Holdings? Has that been a tailwind? What does that mean on the ground for a small PLC? No,
it's a really good question. I think things are becoming a lot easier now, and I'm talking as a Vice Chair of Defence Holdings, but also CEO of Voyant, which is very much in the defence space and an SME. So last year we had the Strategic Defence Review, which came out, which basically said this is where we think the armed forces should be going for the next 5-10 years. We then had, soon after that, the Defence Industrial Strategy, which was all around, and this is purely UK, which was all around how does the industrial base, how does the defence industry need to develop to be able to support the armed forces going forward. And then we just sat and waited for the Defence Investment Plan, which obviously has been in the media a lot recently, and finally has arrived. That I think has been the trigger. Certainly in the UK, everyone's been on tenterhooks in terms of we've got this fantastic plan of where we want to be. We've got industry that's now ready to go, because we've got various initiatives to help support them. Like we're going to spend X billions into the SME ecosystem. But where's that money going to go, and how much is it going to be, and how much is going to be spent? And that's what we've been waiting for. And now that's happening. So it's interesting. It's exciting. The two companies that I'm in are very much at the forefront of where the MOD want to take the military moving forward. So we're starting to see that money trickle out of the MOD, and sometimes that will come to us direct, which is fantastic, or sometimes it will obviously go through the primes like the BAE systems, the Babcocks, for example, on those big programs. So it's starting to filter through, which is great.
And I imagine also on the investor side, this has, and because you guys have raised quite a bit of money, and also been able to take advantage of a relatively new mechanism to the UK, the ATM facilities, which had not really been possible to use previously because there just wasn't enough liquidity.
Yeah.
But I guess this macro tailwind has meant it's probably much easier to raise money from investors now because there's more of them looking at the sector, and then you can do more creative things like the ATM. I'm not sure how involved you are in the IR side of what Defence Holdings does, but I imagine what has been happening the last 6-12 months has brought in a lot of very different type of investors as well that perhaps weren't otherwise in investing, in public markets.
Yeah.
Have you felt that at all, that there's a lot of different investors coming through?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, you look at the headlines and it's very much about VCs investing in the defence sector. The big companies like the Palantirs,
which
the Helsings,
wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
Which wouldn't have happened years ago. Yeah, exactly. And the Helsings, for example. And one of the things with Defence Holdings, we wanted to be able to allow the public to invest in defence, and more importantly, veterans as well.
Do you get a lot of veterans?
Yeah, we do, which is great. And they reach out on LinkedIn, asking how things are going and how the business is progressing. So it's great for that in that respect, because we're widening the net in terms of the investors that we bring in. But I would say it's very much defence is not for short-term investors. I would say it's very much for long-term investors and financial institutions, and those willing to actually put their money in and see it grow over the 5-10 years. But because defence is a long-term market, we're getting better, I think, in terms of procurement processes and procedures. There's various initiatives that are out there by the MOD, NATO, and also very much in the US around, I would say, flash to bang in terms of technology at concept level through to actually in the field, which is great, but there's still a lot more that could be done to bring technology in quickly, and so you find that the processes and procedures for procurement are still medium.
And I imagine there would be, it's obviously veterans would have some understanding of the time scale of these things, but not every investor would.
No.
And so there would certainly be people coming in perhaps more accustomed to, let's say it's like a mining company and there's results every 3 months, but perhaps not used to the time that it actually takes to do things like this.
Yeah, and you've got to realise it's public sector money at the end of the day, and it's not, and that comes with a lot of governance in itself, quite rightly.
Well, so very serious things that
it is very much so, and obviously that has a knock-on effect in terms of how long it takes for contracts to be.
Well, zooming back out, final thing, because we could talk about this for hours. Public leadership. So thinking about your role on the board of Defence Holdings and thinking about how public leadership has changed already in the last couple of years with everything that's happening in the world and the constitution of the markets. How do you think, well, let's think ahead. So let's think 5-10 years time for someone that's sitting on a board of a public company. How is that role going to change, and what sort of skills do you think will become more important for someone who is in a board role on a public company in the UK?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think well, a couple of things. So I would say there's likely to be more involvement from an AI perspective.
Okay.
So it'd be, the role as it is now alongside AI technology. How does that does that sort of work? What blend and how does that role and adoption of AI and governance of AI work at a boardroom level? And I think the other thing, it's something that we're involved in at the moment and we understand at the moment. But I think as time goes on, we will need to get better trained in it, and that is resilience and was the word crisis management. But we're the ability to be able to adapt quickly to change, whether that change is geopolitical, whether it's I'd say probably geopolitical mainly, because there are so many things happening in the world quite quickly. We've seen tariffs with the US. We've seen pandemics like COVID, supply chain issues like the container ship that got stuck in the Suez. And then, obviously, war in Ukraine and Iran.
Let's double click on that, because that's a great point, and we can actually tie that to your AI point, because that is certainly the case that, yes, geopolitically, but also technologically, like AI that is an entirely new paradigm and platform that is suddenly at the forefront after maybe 3 years. Whereas you see the invention of the computer or the internet, and maybe that takes 10 or 15 years to then become a new paradigm for businesses to adapt to. And it seems like the revolutions or cycles of change are just becoming far more compressed and far more frequent. And so, not to put words in your mouth, but that would mean from a board perspective, particularly in public markets where you've got that live scorecard of the share price every day, you need to, I suppose what you're saying is you need to be able as a board to respond to those things so much faster than previously. You don't have 10 years to figure out how you introduce computers to the company. You've got maybe months to figure out how you respond to whatever this new thing is that's happening.
I completely agree. And, and to add to that, there is so much information out there now. It's how do you disseminate the useful information from the useless information, and being able to prioritize what information to action on is going to be incredibly difficult as we move forward.
Well, and that probably means when we were talking about Lord Horton before, and you gave me a very lovely compliment saying he's very good at finding strategic clarity and taking everything and then picking a through line and saying, great, I've taken these 10 inputs, this is what we're doing. That will probably become even more important going forward, because you can't afford to have 6 months of board back and forth because people can't get consensus. With change happening so frequently, you've got to cut through.
I completely agree. And I think as a chair, you need to ensure moving forward that you have the right team in place to be able to support you, to allow you to provide that strategic clarity.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, James.
Thank you very much.